Welcome to the Books Between Friends podcast.
3 lifelong friends,
one shared obsession.
Books.
From epic fantasy to page-turning thrillers.
We dive into the stories we love
And the ones we just can't stop talking about.
So take a seat,
Grab a drink.
And get cozy.
All right, welcome back, friends. Speaking of cozy, what is making you guys feel cozy these days? So for us, we have been watching The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives on Hulu. I mean, we just love to always find like a drama-filled reality TV show that we can just turn our brains off to at night. So that's what we've been watching lately. Jen, what's been keeping you cozy lately?
So for me, I got to see my niece, the one that lives in Fort Worth, last Friday. And I actually get to see her again tomorrow. And I get to see my other niece as well. So like just the thought of them is making me feel cozy. And it makes me really happy whenever I'm with them. So that's honestly been keeping me cozy this week.
Yeah.
Ethan, what about you?
Y'all, I don't dabble in the anime world very often. And when I say very often, I mean like ever. So
Okay.
I was recommended a certain anime show, and it's called Summertime Rendering. It was fantastic, but it was kind of like the gateway, I guess, to get me into more anime. And so that's what's been keeping me cozy. I've just been on a binge, and these stories on these are just fantastic. I just finished watching Solo Leveling, and now I've watched Frieren, which both Solo Leveling and Frieren I knew were up for like a lot of major awards in the anime world, and so I watched both of them. Now I'm watching Apothecary Diaries on Netflix. It's just really good, and there's a lot of good stories. Like we always say, you know, read more because like it's just fun and you get to go to all these different worlds, right? It's the same with anime. Like they're all different worlds, and it's really great storytelling.
That's so cool. I've never like even dipped a toe into the world of anime. The only thing I've ever heard a lot about was like, what was that series that was big when we were like in college? Full Metal Alchemist?
Yes, yeah, Full Metal Alchemist, yeah.
I knew someone in college that was obsessed with that, but I know nothing about it.
Yeah, I would say the only anime I ever got into was probably Dragon Ball Z, and that is anime, right?
Does that count?
It is.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, it does count, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I watched Dragon Ball, and then I watched Dragon Ball Z, and then I think when I finally got to like Dragon Ball G tiers, it was something after Z. I stopped watching it, but Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z were like really good. Love the story, love the storyline there. I watched it a lot because of my brother, and I just really got into it.
That was a boys' show, girl.
Oh yeah, but dude, it was so good. Like it was really good. I
just remember my cousins watching it, and all it was like full episodes of them like with veins popping out of their temple and like sweating and just growling at each other for 30 minutes, and
a whole episode is literally them staring each other down before it even gets to the point where they're gonna fight. It takes like 5 episodes before they finally fight. It's so funny, but I love it. I just love the storyline. But I was
love that for you. I don't know if
I would still watch it even now. It's just so good.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like intimidates me. Like I know because there's so much of it that I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
But I guess like when we were kids, the big one was obviously like Pokemon, right?
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then
classic.
For me though, I always loved Digimon more than Pokemon, and I know that like it's like blasphemy.
I always forget about that.
But I loved Digimon. Oh my gosh, I loved that show. And then Avatar: The Last Airbender. Some would say that that's not even anime, but I always make the argument that it is. But yeah, to this day I recommend Avatar to anyone because I think it is the perfect show. Hands down above any other show that I will ever watch. It's a huge statement, but I think the storytelling in that show is amazing, and it has one of the best like villain redemption arcs ever.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, you guys. So we are so excited to start our deep dive discussion of The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah in this episode. And I'm even more excited that I am going to be our lore master for this time around. So as a reminder, in our podcast world, the lore master is the person who guides our discussion for a book. So for last time when we were doing A Darker Shade of Magic, Ethan was our lore master. And when we were reading Onyx Storm, Jen was. So now it's my turn. And before we get started though, I'm going to pass it off to Ethan to give us a quick spoiler warning.
All right. So, like Steph said, quick spoiler warning. If you are listening to this episode, we are assuming you've read through chapter 10 of The Nightingale. So, there will be spoilers throughout this episode. Also, just another reminder that if you couldn't tell by our accents that we show sometimes, we are all from Texas and not France, where this story is based. So, we may get a couple of names wrong here and there. And by here and there, I do mean all the time. So just bear with us because, again, we are not from France. We are not French experts. So there's a warning for everyone.
We did try to look up the pronunciations. I have a feeling we're going to struggle anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about our first impressions. I am already getting emotional, you guys. We're just starting off, and page one already had a line in it that just kind of stabbed me in the heart. And so I can already tell we are going to be in for some feels with this one. And I'm also just loving the dynamic so far between the two sisters that are the main characters, Vianne and Isabel. I'm just really liking their storyline so far and the way their characters contrast each other, and how they cope differently with loss in their family and, you know, the war that's happening. I'm really excited to see their character development. I can tell it's going to be great.
Yeah, so for me, this book has been very hyped, and I say hyped, not overhyped, because it's been really great reading the first 10 chapters so far. So I think it's been appropriately hyped. I've heard from every person that's read it how emotional it is. So honestly, going into it, I don't know that I'm ready to get into my feelings. I don't know that I am ready to dig deep into this emotional journey that we're about to get into, because we've been reading a lot of fantasy lately. I've been reading a lot of romance, and so a lot of those romances have happy endings. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to feel about this one. And honestly, I was a little nervous about, I'm excited, don't get me wrong, but I was a little nervous because I really want to do this book justice, right? It's such a great story already, just 10 chapters in. So I really want to make sure that we do right by it. But yeah, I mean, the emotions that both sisters are already expressing so much. They both have some serious childhood trauma. You can tell how much it's affecting them. Everything's going to just be so emotional with war on top of all of that. And, I love just seeing the differences between the sisters, and I agree with Stephanie. I can see how there's going to be some really great character development here.
So initially, shout out to my teacher besties in China Spring, because we're going to rewind to the time of the pandemic, right, where everyone was Zoom calling with each other just to try to maintain that level of contact, right? So after quarantine was over, I was already in the Dallas area, and we just maintained that type of connection, right? Where we would just regularly call people even after quarantine was over. And so I wasn't surprised at all to get a call from one of them. And so I open it up, it's FaceTime, and then I see all of my teacher friends all in one room together, and they're having a book club discussion over this book. And so this book has been on my radar since then. And so I've been ready to dive in since that time. I am like the fantasy person, right? And so that is where I thrive in reading. But even though I've wanted to read this book, it gives me, some hesitation, some pause, because there's no way that I can say, oh, well, that happened, it's okay that happened because it's in a fantasy world. That's not the case here.
Right.
These are real feelings from they're not real people, but they could have been, right? And this is our world. This did happen. And so that's what makes it more real and more impactful when those emotional gut punches do come around, which I know they will be, because like both of you, I've already picked up on those tones. In the very first chapter, we're talking, it's the imagery is so vivid, right? With this idea of plenty and the food that they have. And I'm like, God, all that's about to go away, and I know that that's what's going to happen, and that's what gives me like this sense of foreboding into like the rest of the story. So those are my first impressions. I'm excited to dive in.
Okay, you guys, so let's dive in. So the storyline starts in 1995 with an elderly woman who's reflecting on the past as she's preparing to move to a care facility. And so she goes up to her attic and pulls up this trunk that's filled with mementos, and she starts pulling them out and looking at them, one of which is an identity card with a name that says Juliet Gervais. Hopefully I said that right. And then her son finds her up in the attic looking into the trunk. So that's all we get from this first chapter. So it's just kind of like a little prologue to get us started. But we can see, it's foreshadowing, obviously this woman went through the Second World War. It alludes a little bit to her sister that seems to be estranged now. And so, obviously we don't have a lot of context, but it's already bringing up a bunch of questions like, who is she? What did she go through? What are we looking at here with these mementos that she pulls up? Did y'all have any?
So obviously without context, like the only thing I kept thinking about was, who is this woman, right? We don't know who she is. The only thing that gets revealed is the name of her son, Julian. So really I kept thinking as I was reading that we were about to get the significance behind the trunk, because I know that it was also mentioned that she's sick, right? And that her son was saying, oh, well, you beat it already before, you can beat it again. And, she was having this like inner monologue saying it's different this time. Like I don't see that happening now. So I think, she's coming towards an end of her long life. And so we're about to get this big story. But later, as we're reading the chapters, the two sisters that get mentioned in the story, their father's name was Julian. So as I was like preparing notes for our discussion today, that made me think like, okay, if the dad's name is Julian, then this woman can either be Vienne or Isabel. So I'm just curious to see who it is at the end. I'm sure it's going to do like a full circle kind of moment, right? Like right now we're about to get the backstory, and then at the end it'll come to like who that woman was and why Juliet is so important. Because that's what prompted this whole thing was the name Juliet, for us to kind of go back and revisit what happened.
Right.
Yeah. I thought this was like a really clever chapter to write. It called back to like a lot of childhood memory, almost like The Princess Bride, where the kid is reading like the storybook and then like it goes into the story.
No, I know.
But it also kind of made me think of The Notebook a little bit, how it starts out with something like completely different and it uses it as an opportunity to flash back to a story, right? And so that's where we are here. Like it was all a setup, and especially the trunk where she starts pulling out all the different mementos and stuff like that. It was reminiscent of that. And I also picked up on the name Julian. It's not really a spoiler because it is in the rest of the book, at how not good their childhood was, right? And once we are introduced to their father, it made me think, well, if this is one of the girls, if this woman is either Isabel or Vienne, did their dad redeem himself in some kind of way to honor, that, I mean, because that's a big deal to name your child after someone. Right. So maybe he was able to redeem himself in some kind of way. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I'm like, why would they name their child after a dad that well, we'll get into that. But yeah, I was just like, wow, why would they do that? So I am curious to see how that kind of gets full circle on the whole story.
Right. All right. So after that first chapter, the story shifts us back in time to France in August of 1939. I had to do some Googling to understand exactly where we're at in this time frame for historical context. Yeah. This is right before the German occupation of France, and we're introduced to our first sister, which is Vienne Mauriac, who is a school teacher who's living in her family home in a town called Carrevaux in the Loire Valley of France. So this is like the French countryside, very picturesque, like what Ethan mentioned earlier in his first impressions. It's like very quaint life with her husband Antoine and their daughter Sophie. And they're having a picnic, and her husband Antoine tells her that he's getting drafted. And she doesn't want to really think about that right now. She just wants to focus on, this family time that they're having. So obviously it's a picturesque, really nice family moment, but with the backdrop of like what's about to hit them really is World War II. So obviously it's kind of giving you a little bit of foreboding, of foreshadowing of what's about to happen to this family and what her mindset is going into this era in her life.
Yeah, and really, like, this chapter gave us a lot of background on Vienne specifically and the family, because this is where we find out that Vienne and her sister Isabel were abandoned by their father Julian, which is why, Ethan and I kind of mentioned that we were surprised that if it is one of the sisters, why would they name them, or why would they name their son Julian, right? And so we find out here that the father abandoned Vienne and her sister 2 weeks after their mother had passed away. Vienne was only 14, Isabel was 4, so quite an age difference there. And with everything Vienne was facing, she really found an escape in Antoine. And so we kind of get that love story here as well, or how they met, how they fell in love. She became pregnant at 16 and then got married at 17. So you can tell that she really leaned into Antoine in desperate times, right? And so she really depends on him a lot, even now in their marriage. One thing that I really picked up on this, and Ethan, you mentioned it earlier with the imagery, and then Stephanie, you mentioned like the picturesque background that they're kind of painting here with the family. That's exactly what I picked up too. Like, she's really painting this picturesque, perfect life, right? The love she has for her husband, the love she has for her daughter, even describing the beautiful day they were having on the picnic. I mean, I think the line said, like, the day passed in a haze of sunshine, warmed contentment. Like, that's very heavy on the sunshine and the happiness and the perfect life, right? Yeah. And so she absolutely did not want to talk about the war when Antoine brought it up. She didn't want anything to ruin that perfect life that she has built or worked so hard to build, right? And the other thing too that I picked up on is that, I don't know if naive is the right word, but like that was the first thing I thought of. Like, I think she's just very naive. Like, she doesn't want to accept the truth. As Antoine was getting ready and trying to prepare her for maybe the worst, she was like, it's okay, you're going to be home in no time. Right. The line's going to hold. And she was like, Lord knows the Germans are no match for us. Like, just very naive, very like, it's okay. It's going to go by really quick and you're going to be back home and we're going to have this perfect life again. So that was my like first thought when I was reading this chapter. I was like, wow, this girl just does not want to accept that something could ruin her perfect life,
Right.
Yeah. I think it's such an exercise. I'm going to like sound really pretentious here, but I think it's such an exercise in like cognitive dissonance, right? When we think about the character of Vienne, and I think it was really smart to start with Vienne because she has this picturesque ideal of what the world should be. And that is very warm and sunshine and rainbows and stuff like that. And so I think it was incredibly smart to start with her because it just clearly, it's going to be a clear night and day difference when the war actually does come for her. And so it's, that was cool. But at the same time, it is that cognitive dissonance here because we, in today's time, especially in millennials and up and younger, right, we have this idea of women in the workplace, women in society, an idea of empowered women, right? We're not going with the 1950s housewife, right? But that is the ideal here. And she is the embodiment of that idea. And I think you're exactly right, Jen. Like, she is naive and it's going to come at the cost of her and her daughter, right? Like she has her daughter. It's only going to hurt her and her daughter if she won't get her head out of the sand, right? She's like that ostrich or that flamingo that has her head stuck in the sand, and nothing can, fracture her perfect world, but it will. And if you're not willing to meet it head on, then you're not going to cut it.
Yeah. And Jen, I'm glad you mentioned how young she was, not only when their dad sent them away, but also when she became pregnant with Sophie and got married to Antoine, like it was pretty soon after this happened, you know, that initial abandonment happened
Right.
at 14. So like you can almost put together the pieces of like her family structure and unit that she had known up until that point
Right.
got destroyed when their
Yeah.
mom died,
Yeah.
and their dad wasn't capable of like holding it together for the family. And so she rebuilt an ideal family with Antoine and Sophie. And so she probably has never really taken the time to cope with that loss and just
Right.
kind of like patched it up by replacing this picturesque ideal family, you
Well,
know? So
remember, she had several kids before she had Sophie, and she miscarried several.
she miscarried a
And
few. Yeah.
so,
It's like 3, right?
yeah, I think it was three
Mm-hmm.
because she was going through a lot of grief too. And
Right.
it's just one of those things where, like, obviously doesn't want to relive any of this grief. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
she's clinging on to this perfect life, right?
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah.
Like you feel for her already, and you
Right.
know what's coming, and
Yes.
it's, you know, the sense of dread is already like coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So then we fast forward a little bit to June of 1940. So it's just like 10 months later. And then we meet Isabel, the younger sister. And she's at a finishing school. And she is getting expelled from this finishing school because of her behavior. And we get the sense that this is not the first time she gets expelled from this type of school. So already we get like a big contrast in these two sisters and their difference in personality. One is very picture perfect housewife, and then the other is, you know, a rebel who gets expelled from schools left and right. I really enjoyed getting introduced to Isabel here, and I'm really liking her so far in the story, and her rebellious, rambunctious nature. And she's very headstrong. I like that about her. And especially that parallel between her and her older sister, Vienne, who's, you know, kind of like a perfect opposite end of the spectrum to her. But anyway, so she gets expelled from this finishing school and gets sent back to live with her dad in Paris. And she only lasts there for a week before he decides to send her away again to live with Vienne in Caribou at their family home. And her dad gets her a ride with the butcher and his family who are going off to Orleans. But on their journey there, the truck actually runs out of gas, and it seems like they're not the only ones that are making this exodus out of Paris. There's thousands of people, not just in cars, but also on foot, making their way out of the city. And so they actually end up abandoning the truck and continue their journey on foot. And she separates from the butcher and his family and runs into a young man named Gaetan. And he is a communist who just got released from prison. So already kind of a shady character, maybe. We don't know. I mean, nothing happens bad between them, but you know, that's one of the first things she finds out about him. But they kind of form a little bit of a friendship early on once they meet, and they decide that they're going to check on their families before actually joining the war. So they move on together with this plan, and unfortunately on their journey together, they get caught up in a German attack in one of the small towns on their way there.
A lot happened. Like, so much happens with Isabel's when there's that switch with POV, right? Like, not only do we get what kind of girl Isabel is, but we're also getting now the start of the war. And so it's just kind of a lot going on at the same time. Besides her rebellious spirit as she's being kicked out of school, like the first thing that I really picked up on and that just made me like really feel for Isabel was her conversation that she was having with the madame, right? And she was telling her, my father would put me anywhere to get rid of me. Isabel would rather blurt out the truth than hear another lie. She had learned many lessons in the parade of schools and convents that had housed her for more than a decade. Most of all, she learned that she had to rely on herself. Certainly her father and her sister couldn't be counted on. And so because like that was right in the beginning, that really right away let me know how she feels about her sister, right? So you can tell there's not a good relationship there. And honestly, it kind of explains her rebellious spirit and her fears, independence, right? She didn't feel like she could count on her dad. Obviously, he abandoned them. She never really felt like she could count on her sister. So she had to become this independent person. And so she, as soon as she gets to her dad, she quickly tells him she wants to stay with him instead of being sent away, which shows she's still craving his attention and his acceptance. She doesn't want to be sent away. She just wants to be with her dad. And so I really did like seeing the differences between the sisters and just kind of how they're both perceiving war. On the one hand, you have Vianne, who is trying to stay blissfully ignorant and she's doing her best to stay in her perfect little bubble. And then on the other hand, you have Isabel, who's been following the news on the war through her radio. And when the Germans hit Paris, she's ready to just jump in and fight. She doesn't want to run away scared. She wants to go in and fight. She refuses to go to Caribou with her sister because she wants to be useful, right? And so that's what I really picked up with on this introduction to Isabel. Is just like her fierceness and her like fierce independence too, like, and where that came from really.
Yeah.
I love how this section or this chapter just opens up like right out of the gate, fists coming at you, because that's how fiery Isabel is. Like she's angry. Like she needs some anger management, like just because of, I even wrote it in our notes, like it's, even though this is not fantasy at all, it reminds me of A Darker Shade of Magic, because Vianne and Isabel are clearly products of their environment.
Right.
And so, but what's unfortunate for Isabel is that Vianne was older and there was an age gap between them. And so because of that, it's a perfect setup for Isabel to be acting exactly how she is, right? She's very rebellious. She, even though she made, like, she wouldn't claim that's the reason, like she's claiming she wants attention, right? She wants to be important to someone. She wants to matter. And so you see that here clearly. And I can't, as a former teacher, I can't say that her line to her teacher, she's like, generally, madam, the failing of a student to learn is the failing of the teacher to teach. I can't say that I did not bristle at that statement. I was like, oh, girl, you are testing their limits. And like, they expelled you. I can't, like,
It's true.
Okay, regardless, you don't show that disrespect to a teacher. Like, so I saw that, I read it, I appreciated it, and then I was able to move on, because a good teacher, and a good teacher that knows they're a good teacher, or maybe not even know, but a good teacher in general, will come at it from a compassion point of view, right? Well, like, I know that that's not true what you just said, right? So what's going on? Like, talk to me. Right.
Dig deeper.
But she's not getting that from anyone. And so why would she have the reason to act any other way? But I love just like you two, I love the stark difference between the two sisters. That it's very yin to the yang, right? Like they are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Totally. And I don't think we mentioned what caused the abandonment from their dad. So I think earlier when we're introduced to Vianne, she contemplates, like in her inner monologue, back when she was 14 and sent away with her sister who was 4 at the time. It was because, yes, their mom died, but also because their dad had just gotten back from the First World War.
Oh, right.
And when he came back, she mentions that he was different after that.
Yeah.
And as we know now, like at the time, I don't think that, you know, the knowledge and context around like how that might affect someone's mental health was very widespread. And so, you know, they probably didn't even have the vocabulary or like the ability to really understand what that meant or why he, you know, couldn't handle or cope losing his wife after a trauma like that.
Right.
Yep.
You know, I think that there's enough here to really understand where everyone's coming from and the way they coped with the trauma that they were faced with after war, after losing a family member, you know, not being able to deal with that afterwards. And I have a lot of compassion and sympathy for these characters already, you know, so here we go. Like the heavy is already here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not excusing what he did, but he probably did them a favor. Like we've heard of cases where, you know, some people come back angry, you know, with PTSD, and they lash out and things like that. Like, he just didn't have the capacity to take care of his girls, and it probably was better for them to live somewhere else than for him to take, well, really neglect. It would have came down to neglect if they would have stayed with him either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It made me
So
think too that I think there's already a comparison going on of the two girls and their parents, right? Where, because also in that inner monologue that Vianne was having with herself, she remembers when the war was happening and her parents and the dad came back and he was not the same. And that's mirrored, right? Antoine hasn't come home, but it's still mirrored that same way, where the husband went off to war. Antoine may come back, may not come back, but if he does, it's going to be a different person, right? And so it's a comparison of Vianne with her mother and Isabel to her father, like both combative personalities. We don't know if their father, Julian, was rebellious as her daughter was, but it's still that sense of combativeness, right?
right.
Hot-tempered.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they butted heads whenever Isabel was sent to live back with Julianne again, and that's why they only lasted a week. So before he decided to send her away again, and she knew it was coming. So then we're brought back to Caribou with Vianne, and she's still teaching at the local school, but she's worried about Isabel because at this point she should have made it back to Caribou already, but she hasn't heard from her. She was in touch with their dad, but he didn't have any more information other than like, I sent her away about a week or two ago. And then one night, again, she's alone with Sophie because Antoine had been drafted to the war. But one night, hundreds of people come to her home and start banging on her doors and windows, asking for anything and supplies, help, food, shelter. And she just holds up with Sophie all night long and, you know, hopes for the best, but she has nothing really to offer them. And it's a really scary moment because these people are other Frenchmen who are fleeing from the war. The German occupation has already started. They've taken over Paris, and all of these people have started to evacuate, and they're on foot, and they've been on foot for who knows how long, and who knows when the last time they had food or a drink of water was. So they're desperate, you know. So it's so sad to see Vianne not really having a way to help hundreds of people.
Right.
And all of these people needing help, but no way to get anything. But later that night, we get brought back to Isabel and Gait, who have finally made it back to Caribou and their family home. But when Isabel knocks on the door, no one answers. So we get the sense that it's probably after, you know, those hundreds of people swept through town. And so, you know, Vianne's obviously not going to answer the door for anybody, or, you know, they may have fallen asleep or, you know, whatever. So, you know, she tries to knock on the door, no one answers, but they just decide to sit in the lawn for a little bit, and they start talking. And then during this conversation, Isabel reminds him that he promised to take her with him when he goes to join the war. And he says to her, okay, fine, but, you know, if we do that, then we should seal this bargain with a kiss. And they have their first kiss. And then Isabel tells him after that kiss that she loves him.
Sorry.
I know, cringe.
So cringe.
And we get the little tidbit in this book from her inner monologue that it was the first time she had ever told anybody that she loved them since she was 4. So we know that she is around 18 around at this time.
I think she's 19. Yeah. Again, there's just so much happening, right? Like, I mean, what, chapter 2, we already get the start of the war. So going back to the scene with the refugee, one thing that really made me sad and also appreciate like a little bit about what that one person did. So before all those hundreds of people like came knocking on her door, like there was a family that Vianne noticed come up to the gate, and it was like an elderly woman with like her daughter, and she had like a baby or something. And so Vianne immediately goes out there and she offers them shelter. She also offers them food and water. And the lady's like, no, Like, just give us a little bit here, but you need to go back to your house and lock the door. Like, she goes and warns her instead of taking advantage of, the offer that Vienne's giving them. So I really appreciated that of her because I think she would have been overrun. Like, they would have taken her all her resources. They would have taken over her house had it not been for that warning. And then the other thing that really made me sad was that the one carrying the baby, like the baby was dead, and it's just like
Yeah.
snaps you into reality. Like, holy shit! Like, if that didn't bring her into reality that this is happening, that this war is going to be deadly, like, I don't know what else will. I mean, seeing a dead baby, like, oh my gosh, because yeah, you're right. Like, how long have they been walking? How long have they gone without food? How long have they gone without any water, really? I mean, this poor baby probably hasn't had any type of food or water. And so it didn't survive. And that just was so heartbreaking. I was really thinking about Sophie the entire time. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I love Ian, I really do, but like, I love my nieces so much, and they would have been my first thought. Something like this happened, this need to protect, right? And so just thinking about all these people trying to get into their house, I was just so nervous for Sophie and what that was going to mean for her. So I was just really happy that overall all they did was take the garden, like take the vegetables and the fruit from their tree and the water. I was just so glad that that was all they did, right? Because they could have
Yeah.
easily broken down her door and easily broken windows if they wanted to. So
Hmm.
I was happy to see that. The scene with Isabel, like you said, cringe, right? Who tells somebody you just met you love them? But this goes
Oh my
back to what we
gosh.
said about Isabel.
Yeah.
She's just craving someone to see her and to love her and to care for her, right? So, I mean, she was still craving her dad's attention. Here's this guy who gave her a little bit of attention, and she's like, I love you. Like, oh, I feel so bad for her. Like, I know
Like,
I'm laughing, but
oh,
that
girl,
makes
really
me
back, really back.
yeah.
Take it back. Take it back.
I really should not be laughing because that's just how traumatized this poor girl
Oh
is.
God.
Like, how badly
Yeah.
she's just craving attention. But man, so yeah, that's what I was thinking here with Isabel and Gayette. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I read that part. I was like, oh no, sweetie. No,
Yeah.
that's not it. That's not it. Yeah. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, poor thing. Like, he showed
Hmm.
her just that little bit of attention.
Right.
And you're right. Yeah. I love you. No.
No.
I was so, yeah.
Play it cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, especially the scene with the baby, I mean, it just,
Hmm.
Kristin Hannah immediately lets you know that she's not going to pull her punches here. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
if we're talking about a baby that is not alive in chapter 4, I can only imagine how more intense it's going to get later on. But yeah, that was pretty jarring, and it's not enough to snap Vian out of it. Like,
Yep.
I think maybe for like a little bit, she's like, oh, like this is serious. I want your thoughts on this part. Do we think that this mother and her baby is the same mother and baby that we see earlier in just maybe a chapter before, where the guy is like, quiet your baby, like, and she's like,
Oh, I didn't think about that.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, sir, he's just scared, and he's like, we're all scared.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't pick up on that because,
It could be.
when they were escaping pairs, like there was just so much happening.
Right.
Are you talking about them?
Right. Yeah, yeah. There's
Yeah.
that whole scene where where everyone, there's like a group of them, they have to be quiet, but there's a mother with her
Right.
baby.
Oh, right, man. Yeah, I don't know.
Man.
It
Yeah,
could
that's
easily been. Yeah.
yeah, that it could.
Yeah,
'Cause
that would be
and
heartbreaking.
it's just chaos,
would be,
like
yeah.
everyone's just trying to escape. So,
Yeah, exactly.
God.
Poor baby.
All right. So the next morning, Vienne finds Isabel asleep in the yard alone. And she wakes her up and takes her in and helps her to bathe and puts her to bed. And then when Isabel wakes up, she goes down to the kitchen and Vienne gives her some food. And so while they're eating, they start talking about Paris and how it's been occupied now by the Germans. But Vienne has been able to communicate with their father and he's fine. And then Vienne asks Isabel who Gaetan is. And Isabel just says, like, oh, he's no one. But then Vienne hands her a note that was actually pinned to her dress when she found her. And so she opens a note, and it was a note from him, and it says, "You are not ready." So something that obviously, the "I love you"
Right. Scared him.
may have had something to do with that, but I think I just briefly mentioned it earlier, but on their journey together, they actually were caught up in a German attack in a small town that was bombed by German airplanes, and they witnessed people die right in front of them, and they were lucky to be able to get away from that. And that's what these refugees are experiencing on this journey. But something that I kind of notice in between the attack and them finally getting to Caribou is that Isabel kept mentioning that he had gotten like very serious. Their conversations had been a little flirty beforehand.
Oh,
and
right.
he was kind of jokey with her, but after that, he just got very stoic and serious. And there was also an incident right before the attack that we read through, where some French soldiers were also in the crowd, like, of evacuees.
Oh, right.
And he approached them angrily and asked them who's fighting for France. And the soldier that he grabbed said, "No one is." And just kept moving on. But that's kind of the state that the French army is in right now. But I kind of got the sense that Gaëtan decided even before the kiss that maybe he didn't want to like get her caught up in this,
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I was asking myself that question whenever he left, right? I was like, it can't just be the typical male response of running away when somebody says, "I love you." I don't think that's what happened here. I mean, that might have been a part of it, right? But the other thing that I was wondering was, did he leave her because he just didn't want any sort of attachment, knowing that the war could potentially kill one of them? That's what I was thinking whenever he left. Obviously, I was upset he left her because she finally had something to look forward to. She finally had something to fight for, something that was going to make her feel useful, something that she's been wanting forever, right? And then he leaves.
Right.
And so kind of taking that hope from her too, that she could be useful in this war. But I thought that, I was like, well, maybe he just doesn't want to get attached because he knows that it could potentially lead to one of them dying. And so that's kind of where my mind went. I don't know what you guys thought of that.
Yeah, so I I thought I was like, man, kick her while she's down, right? Like, I love you, a little
And then
cringy,
leaves.
I love you, and then he leaves, right? Like, like, bitch, I don't love you, like. And then, like, so that was the first gut punch, and then the second one, it was the note that he just left on her. Oh my God, left
Okay,
on her.
teacher.
I know, an English teacher at that. Jeez.
An English teacher at that.
Yeah, and then he just left a note on her and said, "Yeah, you're not ready." First, what does that mean? Okay,
Right.
And so I was like, man, poor girl. Like, she's just been through the ringer. She saw some death. Saw a lot of blood. Met this guy who just got out of prison, kissed him, said she loved him. He didn't return it. Then he left. That's a lot. That's a hard week,
That's a lot emotional. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but saying that, I predict that this is not the last time we see Gate or Gait or whatever. And I think the next time that we see him, or maybe just hear of him, right? Like, we may never see him again. I don't predict that he'll be a main character by any means, but I do predict that we will get more of him in the future in some form or fashion. And when that happens, I think it's going to be a moment of growth for Isabel. Whenever we do get that moment. But yeah, that was a tough chapter for Isabel.
It really was. I mean,
Poor
especially
girl.
after learning about just how much she craves even being around her dad.
I know, dad kicks her out,
she
gets
just needs
expelled, dad
attention.
kicks her out, she's off to a sister that she doesn't want to live with, and she gets, out of that car with that awful family that he
Oh my God,
puts
I
her
know.
with. I was like, good gracious, you're better off without him. Just go away.
Let's
Find your
do
own
the
way.
daddy issues here, right?
Yeah.
Real. Yikes.
Okay, enough about Isabel. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, girl. I shouldn't be making fun of you. I'm sorry.
She's doing her best, okay?
No, I'm sorry.
Sometimes our best just sucks.
Oh, man.
All right, so now Isabel, for better or worse, is stuck with Bien. They're living together, and one morning on the radio, they
Say
hear
this name.
Marshall Patan. I don't know. And he's a war hero from the First World War. And he says on the radio that France has surrendered and that Caribou is now part of the occupied territory.
Ooh.
And so they've surrendered. So Isabel launches into action. We already know she wants to be useful. She wants to do something about this. And so she decides to gather all of the valuables in the house into this trunk. Enter trunk from chapter 1. And she hides it in an underground cellar that's at the bottom of the, what's it called?
The
barn.
Oh, yeah.
Or is it
in
a
the
shed?
barn. Yeah. A shed or a barn.
Yeah.
She says it used to be a barn,
hayloft
but they
on
keep a
top.
car. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, she did. Yeah.
So
yeah.
So now they keep a car in the shed or barn, whatever this is. But there's an underground cellar where she hides that trunk with all the valuables. And then she also puts in the cellar some other supplies like weapons and non-perishable foods. So, you know, she's got like a little go kit, I guess, in the cellar.
Yeah.
Very smart of her, by the way.
Yeah, honestly, like launched right into action. And then, you know, again, Isabel is keeping up with war happenings with her radio. And so later she hears another speech from the French general, Charles de Gaulle, about the surrender and how it was under false pretenses. And so that gives her hope that there is still a resistance and that she can still do something about this war. And then later on, the three of them, Vienne, Isabel, and Sophie, go into town. I think they were going to pick up their rations for the week. And while they're in town, some German soldiers come into town and raise the flag in the town square. And so, you know, now they've taken over the town because you remember from before, it's now under the occupied territory.
But they were going for a mandatory meeting.
Well, later they do call a mandatory meeting for the whole town to come together and they lay out what the rules are going to be now. So they say there is now going to be a curfew and they also have to turn in all of their contraband, which includes radios and any weapons that they may have. So after this meeting, they go back home and then this captain, Wolfgang Beck, comes to their door.
That wasn't enough.
Right?
Yeah.
Few more.
And he informs them that he's going to move into their home because it's close to the airbase. And so afterwards, Isabel's like, nah, I'm out.
Yeah.
She tells her sister Vienne, like, I'm gonna leave because she can't stand not only being occupied by Germans in town, but also living with one of them in their home. So she tries to leave and goes into town, but she gets stopped by one of the German soldiers who was enforcing this new curfew, and he sends her back home. So there's already tension between Vienne, who's like, no, it's going to be fine. Like, we'll just let him live here. And Isabel's like, no, we have to do something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And honestly, the differences in how they reacted just solidifies more, right? Just the huge differences of how each sister is taking the war. Like, Vienne calmly accepts it. She's like, okay, well, they know best. You know, we surrendered for a reason. You know, he's this war hero. Of course, he knows better than we do. It's all going to be okay. The only thing that she's thinking about is seeing Antoine again, because if they surrender, then that means that the war is over and she gets to have her husband back. And so life will be perfect again. She just kept reassuring herself that everything was going to be fine once he came back. Like, everything can't be fine until Antoine is back. And that just goes back to like that dependency that she has on him for happiness. And so that's all I was thinking about, just like how she really depends on him. She's very dependent on Antoine for that sense of security and happiness.
Right.
Obviously, because she was abandoned, right? And then, you know, Isabel is outraged. Like, she even tells Vienne, she's like, you cannot reason with men like Hitler. Like, we have to keep fighting. And so one of the things that like I noticed right away whenever they were going into town for that mandatory meeting was that Isabel wanted to confront the soldiers and she was staring them down and everything. And I was just really nervous for Sophie because I was still kind of in the state of mind of White London where you're going to get tortured and whipped in the middle of the square.
Yeah. Like,
But that's it though. Yeah.
I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, are they gonna
Yeah.
grab Isabel for confronting them and like whip her and torture her in front of Sophie and are they gonna grab Sophie because she's like there by association? Like I was just really nervous. Like that whole scene like gave me a knot in my stomach and I was like, oh, okay, thank God nothing really happened. Like Vianne just yelled at her to get back, right? But
Yeah.
then like that sense of dread just kept going and going, and my stomach like would just not let up because I was so nervous the whole time I'm reading this. But like when Captain Beck shows up, I was like, ah, fuck. I was like, okay. I was like,
I know.
I thought the same thing.
I thought
right?
he
I was
was going to
like,
drag them
fuck.
out.
Well,
Yeah, I thought they were
okay.
going to get dragged out of their home. Like,
Right.
thankfully, it wasn't that bad.
I
But
mean,
yeah.
okay, you cannot trust a stranger at all, right? Like
Yeah.
already. And now you're putting a stranger who's also your enemy showing up at your door. Like, are you freaking
Right.
kidding me? So yeah, like the whole time I'm imagining like him beating them down or like forcing himself on them, on both of them. Just like a lot of things are going through
Oh,
my mind as I'm reading this whole interaction of him like, hey, I'm gonna come live with you guys. Like, I'm a German. I'm like, oh my God. Like I was just so upset the whole time. I was also very conflicted here.
Yes.
So I understand both sisters here, and so I'm
yeah.
conflicted still. Like I still don't know how to feel. Deanne, on the one hand, like she just wants to protect her daughter. She was like, "Don't antagonize him. Don't make him angry. Don't do anything that's gonna make him, lash out at us. Like we have to protect Sophie." Like that's exactly what I was thinking too. I'm like, what can you do, right? Antoine's not there. You're just two women with the baby. Like, what can you do? So I get Deanne. But I also get freaking Isabel and I get
Right.
her restless like need to do something about it. Like I get that she wants to fight back. I get that she knows there needs to be more to do. Like I get that she doesn't want the enemy living with you. But again, I go back to what can you do? Like what can be done in the situation, right? And so before I'm done with my rant here, like, do I sense, and I kind of want to get your thoughts actually on this, do I sense some foreshadowing here of some sort of relationship between the captain and Vianne? And the only reason I asked that is because I thought I saw some flirting from the captain, not from Vianne, but from the captain, like being overly friendly with Vianne and like just being like helpful and like kept running into her every time she kept trying to find like an alone time. And like I just have this feeling that Antoine's not coming home. Like that's what I feel. That's what I predict. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, it's so there's a lot of conflicted feelings in here for me as well
Mm-hmm.
because I this whole chapter, right? Because it's important to point out too that there's before we get to what we've just been talking about a lot of, there was a lot of setup here of just the relationship between Isabel and Vianne and their dynamic, and that, Vianne paints her sister out to be this rebellious, irresponsible, reckless girl. And then Isabel paints her sister to be this prim and proper goody two shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's bickering back and forth between them. There's never like a quiet moment between the two of them. So
Right.
that's like the
Right.
setup of this, and then we get into that. And so because it was set up that way, and then when we get to the point where they have to have the town meeting, it's a mandatory town meeting, and then the captain moves in with them, I was like, shit. Isabel
Right?
is about
Yeah.
to lose her shit,
Yeah.
and she's going to get their whole family killed. Like, that's the
Right.
dread felt feeling. Like, I knew that wasn't going to happen because we have a whole freaking book to go, but that's what you thought could happen, and just
Right.
that
Right.
uncomfortable feeling because of it. And I was like,
Right.
oh, I don't like that. And I can tell that's where this whole book is going to be.
Yeah.
So there's that, but like you, I can see where both girls are coming from, right?
Yeah.
Vianne honestly pisses
Yeah.
me off a lot. I get where she's coming from. I understand, like, she has her daughter to look out for, but also it's a bit of
Right.
selfishness, right? Like, she wants things. She truly wants things to be as she verbalizes them. Like, it's perfect. Like, as soon as Antoine, like you were saying, as soon as Antoine gets back, he'll know what to do and I can rely on him. It's unhealthy. That part
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
an
yeah.
unhealthy dependence.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Kristin Hannah does a very good job at, writing it that way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's only going to get her and her daughter hurt ultimately because she just refuses to take her head out of the sand.
Yeah.
Like I've
Mm-hmm.
said before. And then Isabel, I love her, but she's just reckless. Like
Yeah.
she
Right.
doesn't think through a lot of her actions. And so I think that's where a lot of growth is going to happen for both of them, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
Isabel is going to have to learn to think first before
Yeah.
she does anything. And then
Right.
Vianne is going to have to learn to trust herself.
Totally. And like, to your question, Jen, with the captain in Vienne, I
Oh, yeah.
think maybe his being like kind to her and trying to like help her out and stuff was more so to try to, make her feel more comfortable. But I could see it getting to possibly a romantic level because we know that Vienne is vulnerable.
Right.
She depends so much on the male presence in her household.
Yep.
And so if Antoine doesn't come back, she's either going to have to like snap out of it or find someone else,
Yeah.
And why not a nice man?
Yeah. And
He's
I,
being nice right now,
Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't know too if they were also using this dynamic between the captain and Vianne as a way to start her character growth, right? Where she
Mm.
even feels this level of conflict where she's like, I don't want to know anything about you because I don't
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
humanize you, right? Like
Right.
I don't want to
Right.
know that you're a dad. I don't want to know that
Mm-hmm.
you're a husband. Like that I don't have my
Hmm.
husband because of your country right now. Like
Right.
and so I
Right.
didn't know if it was just a way to symbolize that, but also at the same time there
Mm.
are a lot of moments that seem rather flirtatious, especially like with the chopping wood
Right.
scene, right? Where
Right.
she's clearly uncomfortable, but she also says yes to letting him take over.
Yeah.
And
Chop the
he's
wood. Yeah.
and she picks up on the way he's dressed, right? Like his
Yep.
where his
Hmm.
chest is more exposed and stuff like that. It's like,
Yep.
ooh, don't do
Right.
that. I get
Yeah.
that
You
he's a
know what
dad. I get that
happens?
he's a husband, and I get that he is human, even though he's
Hmm.
just following orders, right? Like,
Yeah.
but still,
Yeah.
he is the reason. Like, his country is the reason that your husband is not there,
Right.
and
Yeah.
your husband is the one that you really love. Like, stay,
Yeah.
Hmm.
please.
I mean, you know what
Yeah.
happens in our fantasy books when the girl starts like naming
When
off
I
all the
start
things.
noticing the
Yeah, it's like
rippling
noticing the shirt and how
muscles under the
tightly it
shirt.
fits and the
Yeah.
sweat going down, whatever. And so I'm like, that's whenever they're like, okay, there's going to be some kind of romantic thing there. So I'm hoping not, but that's kind of what I
Yeah.
picked up a little bit whenever I was reading that part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that. All right, so that's the situation now in Vienne and Isabel's home. And a week later, while in line to collect their rations, Isabel finds a piece of chalk on the ground, which she pockets. And then later, she goes into an alley and she starts drawing a big V over a Nazi propaganda poster. And as she's doing this, she gets caught, and this man grabs her wrist and pulls her into an abandoned store where there are other men waiting. And at first, she thinks that they're Gestapo, which is German police. But then she recognizes that they're all Frenchmen from Caribou. And one of them says, "Oh, yes, I know your father. You're Isabel, right?" And after they ask her why she was drawing the V on the poster, she won't answer them. And then they show her that they have these tracts printed out, which is flyers that are actually in support of General de Gaulle and the resistance. And they ask her if she'll distribute them around town for them. So she agrees because, like, this is her moment. This is her chance to do something about this war. She's stuck in this situation right now, but now she has something that she can do about it. So she immediately takes the chance at it and says yes. So she takes their pamphlets and goes home, and then she actually stays up and listens for General Beck to finally go to sleep.
Mhm.
And then she gets up at 4 a.m. and gets dressed and goes out and starts distributing these pamphlets. And then she's the first in line the next day to pick up their rations.
So once again, I feel conflicted with this whole situation. Like, for one, like, I'm happy for her, right? She's getting exactly what she's been waiting for. She wants to be of some use. Here she goes, pouring that restless energy into something good, right? So I'm glad that she's doing that because she knew France was giving up too quickly. They shouldn't have given France over to the Germans. Like, I'm so excited that she's finally doing something about it. So on the one hand, yay, Isabel, right? And then on the other hand, it makes me nervous because not only is she putting herself in danger, she's also putting Bian and Sophie in danger. And again, I go back to like that protective feeling that I have for my nieces. That should have been, something that she should have been thinking about when she did this, because I don't see Isabel as somebody who is sneaky and clever. I'm sorry. I don't see her as sneaky and clever. I see her as impulsive and reckless. And she wears her emotions for everyone to see. So for somebody to do a job like this, you have to be sneaky, you have to be clever, and she's not any of those. And so I'm a little nervous for her to go on these secret missions, especially with the freaking captain living in your house.
I know.
I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I think something bad's going to happen, clearly, but I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah. I was kind of pissed at Isabel at this moment. Like, I was rooting for her on one end. I was like, yes, I mean, this is your country. This is your home. Like, she has that righteous indignation, and she wants to act. She wants to be useful. And there is that anger there, right? Like, this is my home. You don't get to do that. Like, how can I fight back in some way? And I was like, I feel that. If I were in that situation, I would feel that same fire to want to fight back somehow and be useful. And so I was like, yes, I'm with you. But at the same time, I was like, I thought about my nieces and nephew. Like, I wouldn't want to endanger their lives, right? And so if that's in your household, she has taken it in their household. Everyone is guilty by association if that had been found.
Yeah.
And so I was like, nope, I'm not going to F around with Nazi Germany. Like, that's not something I'm going to do. But what I picked up on is like, she was taking her basket in, and same as you, Jen, like, I do not think of her as a sneaky and sly person and someone that can pull that off, because she even has the inner monologue where she's like, I've snuck out of the house thousands of times. Like, I can do this. And I was like, bitch, you were caught trying to leave the neighborhood with the spotlight. They clearly found you with the spotlight. And so you were forced to go back home. And now you were almost caught again because she has her basket where the tracks are underneath a piece of bread.
Yeah.
And
the rations or whatever.
The captain
she just put them under their rations.
Yeah. The captain, in another like frustratingly humanizing moment, he was like, Miss, I got you. Let me carry your basket for you. He was trying to be a gentleman, and he was taking her basket for her into the house. And she was like, "Oh, you don't. Oh, please don't do that. Oh God, you did it. Oh God, you have the anti-Nazi propaganda in my basket that you could see at any point in time." Because she even also admits that some of it is visible,
poking out,
right? Like, what are you doing?
Poking out. I'm like, good Lord, here we go.
If he had just looked down at the basket, he probably would have noticed.
I was like,
that.
You knew you were going home where a captain of Nazi Germany is residing in your home.
Right.
Like, why didn't we think about this before? And so she almost gets caught again. Now, luckily it works out for her, but still, that could have ended very, very badly.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm thinking like, girl, put them in your panties or something.
Right?
I don't care.
Which she does, but just
Buy the basket.
like after that whole fiasco. But that part in particular made me think of a book that I used to teach with my kids, like Number the Stars. Very famous book, right? Everyone knows it, but it's such a good story. And in that book, our main character, she's like 11, but she also has something in her basket that she's trying to hide, and a Nazi soldier stops her. And it's a very similar moment in my mind. And I was like, oh, I love that callback, because I love that book. It's a great book.
Yeah.
But that's that. I was like reading this whole part.
Right.
Same. Oh man. And it's just a start. And it's just a start. Like, good Lord, like, what more are you gonna F up? Like, come on, girl, I need you to get it together.
Think before you act.
Right.
Please.
So here's my question to you guys. If you were Isabel,
oh man,
would you do it or not?
I would do it with the caveat that I would have to leave. Like, I'm not going to be in that home, or at least I'm not going to carry that propaganda into the home where a captain lives. I'm going to have a different place where I'm going to hide that, right? But yeah, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it smart,
I don't know that I would call myself that brave. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. I'm not gonna try to sugar be like, oh yeah, I do it. I don't know. I think that I'd be too scared to get caught. I think I'd be too scared to I just have this like sense of like I just want to protect. And maybe what she's doing is trying to protect her niece in her own way, right? Like she knows that if she helps France win, like in the end, then her niece will be protected, right? I just don't think I could put them in immediate danger like that. But that's just me. And again, I don't know that I'd be that brave to go sneak around and do that, knowing that there are German soldiers everywhere, including in your
Yeah.
house. Like
Yeah,
I
no,
wear my emotions on my face too. I know I do. So I know I'd get caught right away. I mean, I can't even tell a joke without laughing and giving it away. So
yeah, no, I'm totally with you because I mean, I would do it, and that's me being ideal, right? Like, yes, of course I would do it. Of course I would fight back against what injustice, right? But knowing myself, I would rationalize my way out of it, right? Like, of course I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to get killed. Like, someone else is gonna.
Yeah.
If I don't do it, someone else will pick up the slack. Like, someone else will be brave enough, right?
that thought is so dangerous because it
It
happens all
totally
the
is.
time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what.
Yeah.
But to Nazi Germany's point, like that's what they were banking on, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that's a tough
So
question. What about you?
I it's also hard for me to say like I would want to do it.
Right.
But like, I'm sitting here in my little privileged chair. I've never been through war,
Right, yeah.
I've never been in a situation this high stakes before.
Right.
I want to say that I would do it, but I don't know that I would have the guts to do
Right.
it, to be honest, And it's funny, it actually pulls me to like one of the first lines in this book. What was it?
I already know I'm not clever enough,
It,
so
in love, we find out who we want to be. In war, we find out who we are.
well, that's
So
Yeah.
good.
I don't know. I want to do it. I want to say yes,
Okay.
but
I
who
can
knows?
see you doing it though. You're a lot fiercer than I am, so
All right, you guys. So that covers these first 10 chapters of The Nightingale. So now we're going to transition into a new section that we're calling the underlined moments. And so this is where we're going to discuss the moments that made us the most emotional, like our favorite ones, and then also our favorite quotes. So I'll go ahead and kick us off for this one. So, my favorite quotes, I pulled up two. The first one is going to be in chapter 3, page 15. This is Vienne speaking. She says, this is part of her inner dialogue. She had tried to be loved by him. More important, she had tried to keep loving him. But in the end, one was as impossible as the other. She's thinking about her dad here when she's remembering how he shipped them away at such a young age after their mother died, and how he just kept sending Isabel to other boarding schools away from him. And the reason I pulled this out is because like that is so hard, when you're going through family issues. It's that conflict of like, you wronged me, but your family.
right.
And I'm trying to still like hold on to that. And sometimes it's impossible to,
Yeah.
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 so like I really sympathize with that. And then the other quote that I pointed out or wanted to point out is from chapter 4, page 27. This is Isabel. And Jen, you mentioned this earlier, I think.
It was Ethan.
This is was it
Yeah.
Ethan? Yeah. So this is when she claps back at her teacher at the finishing school and she says, "Generally, madame, the failing of a student to learn is the failing of a teacher to teach." And so I just loved this quote because it, instantly we get to know who this character is. She is feisty,
Yeah.
she is fiery. She is going to clap back if you try to poke her. So I just love that, like when a character just like wears their heart on their sleeve. Like I love characters like that. So that was one of my favorite quotes. And then my favorite moment was, we talked about this a little bit at length, but so this is in chapter 7 and it's when Gaëtan and Isabel kiss. So Isabel says, "I love you," she whispered. She hadn't said these words since she was 4 years old. Then it had been her mother. And then a page later, she gave herself over to the sensation of the kiss, let it become the whole of her universe, and knew finally how it felt to be enough for someone. And then a few pages later, he had wanted to take her with him until the kiss. Somehow, he had tasted the lack in her.
That was
Got
harsh.
punched.
Oof.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
really harsh.
So, yeah, the reason I wrote this moment down is because, like, there's a lot that happens here. Obviously, it was cringy that she told him that she loved him after their first kiss, and they've only known each other for, like, what,
A day.
maybe a week? You know, like, obviously they went through a lot together
Yeah.
in getting through the attack and, like, witnessing people die right in front of them, a small town get bombed. You know, that's scary. Obviously, that would, you know, bring people closer.
Yeah.
If they're going through it together. But, you know, like, this really showcases, like, what the abandonment by her father has done to her emotionally and how it stunted her. And how she's just grasping for any level of this type of attention. And, like, her and Gaetan immediately were fast friends, and they seemed to, like, have an understanding, like a mutual understanding. And they both wanted to do something about this war, and were really passionate about, like, fighting back and fighting for France, you know? So, like, and I do think that that was genuine and sincere from him. But, you know, like, I don't think that he necessarily saw a lack in her, but I really do feel like he maybe didn't want to, like, pull her into this because, like you said, Jen, they could die.
Yeah.
In this situation, and maybe he just didn't want to put her through that. So that was one moment for me. And then the next moment is at the end of the section in chapter 10, page 129. This is Isabel with the revolutionaries. Henry asks, "Well?" Henry said quietly, and in the single word, Isabel heard the call to arms she had been waiting for. "Will you distribute them?" So this is when he's asking her if she will, you know, distribute these checks for them. And so, like, I was excited because this is really, like, I feel like where this story probably starts, you know, like, now we're going to see what her journey through this war is,
Right.
and, like, how she fought back and what her role was. So I'm excited for her to have this moment for herself, and, like, something she's been looking for ever since the beginning. She's been following, you know, what was going on with the war through the radio, and she wanted to do something about it, and she wanted to, you know, fight for France and be useful somehow. And I think that stems a little bit from her need and want for love and attention, to be needed, to be useful, because, you know, it probably made her feel useless to be passed around from school to school and, like, abandoned from her by her family the way that she was. So that's probably where that stems from.
So I have a couple. I don't have too many. Mine quotes and moments seem to revolve around Isabel because, like I said, Vianne just really pisses me off a lot. Love her. I think she's a great character, and I think she will be an even better character. But right now, I'm just like, come on, kid. But anyway, so I also wrote down the same quote when she claps back at her teacher, so I won't read it again, but I think that's just a great moment to establish character. And then in the next chapter, chapter 5, on page 40 in my book, I have, like, the special hardback edition. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but it was a sad statement because it's part of her, Isabel's, inner monologue to herself, but its beauty was just another way to discount her, to not see her. And I was like, man, like, she really can't catch a break. Like, yes, she is described as beautiful, but even that she sees as a vice, right? Like, she can't trust anything about herself, about the way people are, about people in general. Like, she doesn't know how to interact, period. And so she operates in the only way that gets her anywhere, which is just being headstrong, rebellious, and reckless. And so it's worked for her so far, and it's going to keep on working for her, you know, everyone else be damned. But my favorite moments really revolve around character development, even in this early stage. And for right now, it's more of the potential that I see it could be rather than where they are right now, because both of them frustrate me at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm like, gosh, Isabel, just slow down and think. And then Vianne, I'm
Right.
like, gosh, speed up and act. Right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
I need there to be a happy medium here. So, yeah, but I don't really have
Where's the
any...
Goldilocks one?
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I need it to be
Sophie?
just right. You're right. Yeah. So I need them to get with the program, but I don't have any specific like favorite moment here. It really just kind of revolves around their character development so far.
Cool.
So for me, when I came to like quotes, I thought about one that made me really sad and one that like made me laugh, right? So the one that made me really sad was on chapter 2, and this one involved Vienne, and it said, "You will be the adult now," her father said to Vienne as they walked up to this very house for the first time, and that was her at 14 years old. And that just like, I mean, what kind of life was she expected to have when your dad tells you at 14 years old, you are the adult now? And it made me sad too, because I sympathize with the students I used to teach, right? Because we do have a lot of that. And I taught elementary school. So I saw a lot of this happening with elementary students where they had to be the adults. They had to be the responsible ones. They were forced to do these things from the lack of responsibility that their parents were showing, right? Or because their parents were too busy working too many jobs to keep up with the economy. So it was either or, right? And it just made me so sad that is what shapes Vienne. Like that moment right there is what shaped her to be the person that she is now. So made me really sad. I really wanted to point that one out. And then the one that made me laugh, literally the three of us picked the same one.
Yeah.
And it was the one about the failing of the student to learn, right? And I laugh because, well, for one, it shows her cheeky side. And then the other two,
Yeah.
I work in education, so if a student tells you that they don't feel like they're learning because of you, like, I don't know, to me, like, that already means you're not a great enough teacher. Like, I know we have students that maybe don't have as great relationships with their teachers, and the teachers really are amazing, but if a teacher tends to have a great relationship with their student, and their student's not going to have that need or the field, or the student is not going to have the need to say these things to you, right? They're not going to say that to you. So like that teacher is obviously not doing a great job with Isabel. And so I thought it was hilarious that she said that, because I was like, yeah, I mean, pretty much. So that made me really laugh. But it's funny that the three of us chose the same one, because it was just like, it made me giggle, especially in the middle of like all this like, dread that we know is coming up.
Yeah.
Right.
For the moments, also kind of did similar, where like I chose one that made me feel, it was just very emotional, and then one that made me feel really good. And so the first one is on chapter 3, and it has to do with Isabel, and I think she's still having the conversation with the madame at the school that she's getting expelled from. And so the madame is trying to justify to Isabel that why her dad abandoned the girls, and she said, well, it's hard for a man to lose his wife, right? Like just justifying that it was okay for him to abandon them. And then Isabel says, it is hard for a girl to lose her mother. She smiled defiantly. I lost both parents though, didn't I? One died and the other turned his back on me. I can't say which hurt more. And I'm just like, why are we not seeing these kids' grief? Like, why are we not seeing it from their point of view? Why are we justifying the parent for what he did, when clearly, like, this girl is grieving too. She did lose both parents, and nobody seems to understand that.
Right.
So like that one really really emotional for me. The other one that I chose made me feel really good. It was a little emotional too, but made me feel good. And it was on chapter 7, and Isabel and Sophie are having a conversation here. And so it says, Isabel glanced at Vienne. It is easy to disappear when no one is looking at you. I am looking at you, Sophie said. Will you make yourself invisible now? And so one thing that we didn't touch on as much is the relationship between Sophie and Isabel. And, Vienne mentions it a little bit, how she notices Sophie now kind of stomping around with the rebellious, air that Isabel stomps around in, and like how Sophie likes to, follow Isabel around, and and it just made me feel really happy, like coming from it as an aunt too, right? Like you want to be a role model to your nieces and nephews. Like you want to be somebody they can look up to. And I think that's what Sophie, like Isabel is finally being seen by somebody, and it's her niece. And so I really love that moment. Yeah. It was such a good feel moment for me. And so I really wanted to be sure to bring that one up.
Yeah, I love that too.
It's funny because Vienne mentions it, but she hates it.
Right.
She's
She
like,
does hate it. Yeah.
now Sophie's being a little rambunctious.
Yes.
Because of her.
She even says too, she was like a week. It took a week or a day or something like that for
Yeah.
my daughter to lose like her sense of propriety or something like that.
All right, book friends, that was our deep dive on the first 10 chapters of The Nightingale. Next week, we will discuss chapters 11 through 20. So make sure you interact with us on social media. We are Books Between Friends Pod on all platforms. Be on the lookout for our podcast clips and join us in discussion through our comments. Now, if you're enjoying our bookish banter and our discussion, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help our little baby pod grow. We would love to hear from all of our book friends. And we wanted to give a shout out to one of our book friends, Edna La La La. Obviously, that's a little username that she wanted to use.
We love your username.
I do love it. She gave us 5 stars. Thank you, Edna. And she wrote, this podcast is entertaining and the hosts have such great chemistry. Absolutely loving all the Onyx Storm episodes. It's a great listen. Highly recommend. So please, book friends, even if there's something that you think we can do better, we would love to hear from you. Make sure you leave us a review. Thank you, guys.
All right, you guys. So next time, tensions rise, choices get harder, and the stakes begin to feel real. Join us as we explore how Vienne and Isabel navigate the realities of war and how their paths begin to shift in unexpected ways.